Welcome to Still Serving, the VFW Podcast, the official podcast of the veterans of foreign wars. And now, here's your host, Rob Couture.
Joining me back on the podcast, Medal of Honor recipient David Bellavia. David, always great to see you.
And always great to see you. I appreciate you.
You know, it has been exactly 1 year since our last time that we spoke. Because I spoke to you on, well, it was a little bit earlier than that, but it was on your birthday. So happy birthday is in order.
Thank you.
Again, turning in just 1 year behind me in your late 40s, and we'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think you're holding up better, though. That's the problem.
Well, I tell you what, you look fantastic. You look like you just got off the campaign trail there with everything you have on.
Yeah, well, that's certainly not happening. Just, I had to do a quick inspection at Maricopa County, and I'm back for you. So we're
making sure the ballots are being counted.
Sure the printers are working. I don't know. You just seemed like the purple finger thing worked in Iraq pretty well.
It sure did. Afghanistan, they were kind of orangey, but yeah, that all worked back then.
Yeah, it did.
For some weird reason. Yeah. So here we are, 18 years after the date of action in Iraq, so long ago. Does it feel like a lifetime?
It does. It does. It's weird because I was thinking of like the Normandy generation in like 1962. These guys would have been at the same time that we are now with Fallujah, Iraq, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's a totally different, I think there's a mindset that we want to, some people wear their service on, they low crawl to the copy machine and they got their DD-214 on their car. And that's just pretty much the way they operate. Their service is front and center.
Yeah.
And then you have other people that kind of like put it in a, time capsule a little bit. They just bury it in the yard and they want to move on. And I don't know what the right way to do it. We all navigate how we do it. But looking back after 18 years, you think, so much has changed, but then, it does feel like you were right back there. This is why organizations, if you allow the plug like the VFW, are really crucial to just having a tent where like-minded people can just kind of, how do you process it? What do you do? There's no right answer.
Right.
But maybe older guys can kind of tell the younger guys, what worked for you in Vietnam? What worked for you, over there?
Yeah, especially coming back. I mean, we all went through, those of us that were in Afghanistan went through an awful lot. And the first thing we thought of is like, man, this is what my father's generation went through when they watched the fall of Saigon. And, it's hard to process all those things. So again, thank you for the plug, the VFW and other veteran service organizations that have allowed the Vietnam veteran to come in. They've embraced them, actually, and they've been the leaders in carrying the torch and handing it off to this next generation. But it's interesting that you'd said, people put in a time capsule and they kind of put it away because as we go back to our last interview, and many people know that before you were awarded the Medal of Honor, long before that, you wrote your book, House to House, which was kind of cathartic, right? It was a way of getting that all out and putting it out and say, okay, now I got this all right here and I can move on. And here you are with a new book that just came out. Remember the Ramrods, and congratulations to you on yet another successful publishing. A labor of love, I'm sure, but this is kind of like part 2 to that story.
Yeah, well, the country music album and the cookbook are coming out in about 2 months. But yeah, we're making I don't really know. It's so funny. You came into my life through that whole Medal of Honor process, and I remember, the day that I was told that there was a old 1st Infantry Division public affairs officer.
Yeah.
That was like, being parachuted in, that he had all this experience with other recipients and other awards, and how that was really the first time I felt like I had someone that at least I could connect with. Everyone else was a civilian or they, a colonel. I can't, this was a senior NCO that had been there with me and knew the stories and knew the guys that we lost. And and you became a huge part. And then we went on the tour together in New York and did everything. And so in a way, it's kind of weird because this is kind of what we did together,
Yeah.
and yet I thought about, like, the other recipients that didn't really have any net. They just kind of were navigating this on their own.
Yeah.
There was a choice that it's made. We're conditioned and raised in the military that everything's about the team and it's about selfless service. That's our code. That's our oath. Those are our values. And then they give attention to one or two people, and it's a really weird way to experience it. And one of the things I was blessed to have this Medal of Honor Department of Army task force, if you would, is that they allowed us to make it about the team.
Yeah.
And that's really what my Ramrods in the First Infantry Division were about. You don't do anything single-handedly in the Army. A citation will say it, but that's not the way it is. Everything is done because of the group. And so if you're going to remember the Medal of Honor, talk about the Medal of Honor, I want you to remember everyone who was a part of that, journey with us. And so it's an opportunity to bring attention to people that deserve it, but it's also kind of walking you through the whole Medal of Honor process, which is really, really strange.
Yeah.
I mean, even for someone who's been through as many as you have, how many have you done?
There was 4 living recipients and about 7 or 8 total that I was either directly supporting or kind of on the periphery supporting. But
that's a ton.
Yeah,
they're all different personalities
the
and ages.
Research that goes into it, the talking points, the layout and design. I mean, it's funny because I was just bringing this up. If you remember your poster, right?
Right.
And I remember the first thing you're like, oh my gosh, look at that haircut.
I know, right? It was forever ago. But having that experience though, and being a first ID guy yourself, it was calming, and it was because it's so chaotic and weird, and allowing the guys to come back. What Remember the Ramrods is really about is how you fight with people. And for the longest time, Rob, I thought that I missed the war. I thought I missed combat, and it took me about 15 years to realize I actually don't miss the combat. I miss being needed in the combat. I miss my family, my group, my team, those relationships. And this award, which has the potential to be isolating and weird, it wasn't because I had my team again.
Yeah.
And in a way, it was a great gift to be able to have these men, in your lives every day.
That was one thing that I remember bringing back members of your team, right? Sergeant Fitz, for instance, who I remember, just this great guy, country guy, soft-spoken, bringing him back. He was, and then bringing him to Washington, D.C., and he was almost like a fish out of water. But when the two you saw one another, the hugs, the get together, it was so great. And I knew at that point, I'm like, okay, there's something special about this team that he's bringing back together. And, it's a remarkable story from your action back then. And then another remarkable story, and obviously why you wrote about it, and bringing them all back. And that's really what this book seems to be about, is just that healing process and that closure for everyone.
It is, the First Infantry Division from 96 on, there was always something different about German-based units. And it seemed like, you're forward deployed, but you're not getting the kinetic fight. You're peacekeeping, it's Kosovo. Yeah. There was always like something special about Germany at that time. I mean, Europe was turning on the Iraq War. It wasn't the most friendly place to be. The Germany wasn't really involved in Iraq. They were pretty vocal about not being involved in Iraq. And so there was an us against them sort of. And so you're away from home. 9/11 makes a lot of people insecure about being on foreign soil and what could the threats that were out there. There was always this sense of look after each other, go out with a buddy, your DA-31, make sure you're with someone and where you're going and what you're doing. And it really bred a sense of like, well, we're in this on an island. This is but we're not going to go to Afghanistan. We're not going to get a fight. We're going to get Kosovo, Bosnia, whatever.
Yeah.
And then Iraq hops in, and it's like that entire family that was already kind of distant is now in a fight together. And the way I think everyone responded really kind of, it brought the big red one back, which I don't think we'd been the big red one for a long time. So it was neat to be a part of a legacy and a modern legacy simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, the Big Red One obviously storied from World War One, World War II, Vietnam. I mean, just the unbelievable amount of heroism that came from that division. For it to miss the fight, I somebody, you know, in the five-sided puzzle palace would have been, you know, they would have been wrong to not include them. But I tell you, and looking at the story, looking at the people that you served with, I think it's really good about the book is it does talk about something you brought up in the beginning, and that is, you know, how you compartmentalize it. Because a lot of people struggle with what happened from the war, whether it's the direct combat, who they've, you know, killed in the midst of that combat, because that's what we're called to do, is fight and destroy the enemy. Sometimes mishap happens. Sometimes you don't do the things that you want to do when you're there on the ground to support your team. And so there's guilt, there's frustration, there's that sense of, did I miss the mark? And you second guessing yourself. And when you leave on a deployment, from that deployment and come back home, and especially after you leave out of the military, you struggle with these thoughts. And it's no wonder that we have so many service members that isolate themselves, that, you know, end up taking their lives, as tragic as that is. It's because a lot of times they don't have the wherewithal to handle it themselves, number one. And number two, they don't have their brothers and sisters, but in this case, the brothers. And that's why I found to be so touching about the book, is that it really opened up a lot of that. And you were open in the discussion.
Well, I appreciate that. I think one of the things that, you know, when you write or you just are thinking about the war, years removed from the war, it's a completely different experience than when you're approaching 20 years removed from the war. And we're different people and different cycles of life. And we mature and we think about, you know, just the nature of combat in Iraq, this counterinsurgency thing. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the hearts and minds thing. I'm an infantryman. I want to, you know, it's a threat. What do you mean I can't take a threat out? Why? What happens with the civilian population if they see me take out a known terrorist? Well, you know, I'm not looking for their vote. I'm looking to keep them safe. If they don't understand that. But no, it all adds to the fidelity of your actions in the moment. Your actions can affect the reaction someone has to an American 2 years down the road. 2 years down the road, they might react differently to harming an American depending on your behavior in the present. That just blew my brain. Yeah. I had no comprehension of that. And I think I developed a sense of superiority over civilians, like a lot of veterans do. We come home and we're like, don't give me you work at an office in a cubicle. I don't want to hear about your privation. I don't want to hear about your sacrifice. You know, why can't you serve? Why is it a family tradition? Why is it that you're doing what your dad and your mom and your uncles did? Why can't everyone do this?
Right.
You know, and you start to realize, well, it's not for everybody. I get it. And it doesn't mean that real people aren't going through real things. And at the same time, it also means that maybe the experiences we endured in combat, we can use to help other people here. And we can help people go through isolation and understanding what validation is and accepting your place, and realize that, you know, we're serving now as civilians more than we did in uniform.
Mm-hmm.
You know, ambassadors of our branch, explaining to people that anyone can do this. You're not genetically different because you want to serve your country. It's something everyone can do from every walk of life. And the other piece of it was that I made a lot of mistakes when I came home. And the mistakes were that maybe if I could forget about the war, I have to forget about what I was as an NCO. And that these guys that were really reaching out at 2 a.m. I mean, look, you get 3 calls at 3 a.m. And after the third call, you need to find a new battle buddy because I got things to do. I got, there's only a limit to my patience here. I don't, why do I got to babysit you? We got other things. Well, when those calls stop and you find out that someone just quit,
right,
it hurts. It hurts really bad. So we are forever sergeants. We are forever soldiers. And that's not an albatross. That's not we're not, Christmas Carol walking around with chains on our ankles and a burden and a weight. It's a privilege. It's an honor. And we need to maintain those promises. And I wasn't. I hadn't maintained those promises. So I'm now able to kind of see the error in my ways.
In this time, we just got through the midterm elections. They said more than ever, well, I wouldn't say ever, but probably in a long, long time, more veterans have got involved in politics, especially with running for office. Do you feel that we're at a place where veterans can really pick it up like our grandfather's generation did after World War II and filling that void of leadership in this country?
So I've always thought that, World War II, there was a drafty army. Vietnam was the same way. You go back to that 1948 election where you had Gerald Ford, John Kennedy, all of these future presidents elected to Congress. And, what an incredible generation that was that, World War I's generation just stepped aside.
Mm-hmm.
And the World War II boys filled in, and then Vietnam, they stepped aside. And you think, well, this is the time to do it. We just have to be super careful, though, because we're 1/10 of 1% of the people that actually served, and it's not indicative of a generation. So we don't want to be the only voice, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we also don't want to become the political class because that's not exactly the most conducive. There are skills that we can bring to the table outside of policy. And a lot of what's happening at the VA and VSO organizations are leadership positions.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are elected within the cohort of veterans, and they're impacting directly the way we're perceived and the information we're given. I mean, we're talking about burn pits today. There was a time in the early 80s when we had symptoms of Agent Orange, Agent Blue. We didn't know what it was. No one knew what was happening. People were getting sick, but what was it? It took those VSOs just hitting the drum over and over again to say, this is happening. You got to acknowledge it. Let's fix it. So there's much more than just the elected office. A lot of people have ambition, and I love ambition. But for me personally, having the opportunity to serve, there's a million ways that you can do that without, there's something about DC that just, I don't want to ever lose the value of who we are and what we do. And that's why the Medal of Honor is so weird, because it's it's about you. Like go to TLC and do my Medal of Honor life starting September's. We're going to have a new reality show, like the Audie Murphy lane of, this season on Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? There's more than just you.
Right.
And so my whole thing is, what's your social media? What's your handle? My social media is get off social media and actually do something. Mm-hmm. I don't need to be the one that reminds you that we can do better. Remind other people to do better, and then you take the credit for it. Who cares? Let's just get it done. Let's help people. Let's stop, the addiction and suicide and all these things that make us victims. We're not victims.
That's right.
We need America to know that we have Democrats and Republicans serving, and there's no affiliation on your dog tag. And you could be gay or straight or Catholic or Muslim, black or white. We're all canceling each other's votes every election season. We get along, we get it done. Get it done. Do it for America. Serve and participate. The partisan stuff is really nuts.
Yeah. So obviously the book has been taking up a lot of your time in the last year. What else have you been up to other than your awesome radio show and podcast that you have?
Thank you so much. I'm just working and getting out there, and I'm aware of, I think about like Chuck Yeager and we lost Chuck Yeager this last year, and he was like 99 or something. But everyone's like, he broke the sound barrier. Do you know that Chuck Yeager broke everyone knows Chuck. He did it when he was 24.
Yeah.
Okay? Can we focus on Chuck Yeager's life outside of his 24th birthday?
Right.
I mean, there's a tendency where they want to kind of just only thing you have to do is live in the past. And I'm focusing my entire life on, I thought the battle buddies that we had in the war, you want to keep those people with you your whole life. But there are other battle buddies out there that aren't necessarily military people that love you and care about you. And you have to kind of build a new platoon sometimes.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to trust again. And it's hard for some of us to trust civilians. And it's like a whole new life to be like, opportunity is fantastic, but keeping your soul while you're going through what you're supposed to do is really exciting and fun. And I love when people hold the Medal of Honor for the first time and then they immediately go to a guy and thank him for their service. Like, we need more of that. We need Veterans Day. Thank you, Applebee's, for reminding us of a free meal.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to know that everyone who serves is looked at on a pedestal the way they should be.
Yeah, I kind of like Veterans Day. Like back when my kids were young and I was at Fort Bragg, doing the Veterans Day crawl from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant. Kids, this is dinner tonight, and you're just getting there. You're loaded up burger.
What it's
fries,
all
wings.
about. Yeah. Midnight on the 12th. It's all over.
That's
We're
it.
back to pain.
Gosh, I forgot what I was going to ask you. But that's really great that you talk about that, because it's important, I think, as appealing as it is to be a vet bro, where you got your grunt style shirt on and you're out there and you're buying all the guns and you're doing all the things. And like you said, your DD-214s across your back windshield. It is important to understand that we do come back and we're part of this American.
My favorite was always when someone would give you a phone number and they throw in the Niner and the fight. And I'd be like, stop it right now. You've never used Niner in your life.
Yeah.
Tree. Yeah. Cheeback.
Yeah.
Like, all right there, buddy. Let's just tap the brakes here. But again, why do we do it? We do it because that time in our life represented a purpose and direction. Mm-hmm. And there's validation in it. And it's beautiful. It's actually beautiful. And I just remind people, I can't change the tribalism of America where everyone wants to be in a group. But I can tell you that our group is pretty special too. And we're a tribe as veterans. And let's focus on that. Let's be proud. But we're in this together. And that comes with ownership and responsibility and making sure that we're honoring our obligations to Gold Star families. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room and they're like, there's a Medal of Honor recipient here. And people break out the jumbo shrimp and they applaud and they go crazy. And then there's like 5 Gold Star families there. And it's like, you gave us your babies.
Right.
You gave us everything for this country. Like that's the wrong priority. Gold Stars first, our Purple Heart recipient second, everyone else. And then you want to bring attention. There are so many folks that we could spread that along to. I think the people that do get the attention, it's our responsibility to say, hey, this is really kind and sweet and it's great. But we've got a lot of old people that never got this. Vietnam vets weren't even thanked until 9/11.
Yep.
So let's continue this, but let's do it for everyone.
Well, I mean, I think you said Vietnam. I think about the wall, which is this year. It's the 40th anniversary since it was built. And
wow.
when that wall was first put on the mall, like people are like, it's ugly, it's un-American, right. It's patriotic. And now it is an icon to those that we lost. And so, there is beauty in that. And I think that it's people just, we may look at it now and say, gosh, but who knows? Our kids might be like, oh, my dad, he served and I remember him always wearing his grunt style shirt, and maybe they'll look on that fondly. And it's not all about the grunt style shirt, but the point is that, sometimes we have to kind of embrace some of what it is, but at the same time, don't be arrogant about it, So,
You talk about the memorials, like the Korean War Memorial is just haunting
oh
and
yeah,
beautiful and perfect. And how many people went through Korea and the forgotten war? Well,
3 years.
Didn't forget it.
Nope.
They didn't forget it. I mean, that's true.
Yeah, they were on pace by the amount of people that they lost to far exceed, if they had gone as long as Vietnam, far exceed that toll, which is unreal in itself. So yeah, Vietnam veterans and the Korean War veterans, there's a lot of them that are passing away. Like there's not many World War II vets left. And it's just great. It's a great opportunity. I always tell people, instead of just saying, thank you for your service, ask the person what they did. Hey, what was it like serving over there? What did you give up to serve? What did you have family at home? You and I both had family when we went and deployed.
The thing you bring up, though, I think is so important. And this is what I like with young people. The audience, we in the Army, we talk about leadership styles and we write our FMs and our field manuals. And everyone's like, well, there's transactional, there's, the fact is, right, we got it all. But the fact is your leadership style should change based on your subordinate. That one style doesn't work for all people. You have to know your people in order to motivate them. What is it that they respond to? Because ultimately, I have to adapt. I got to get the mission done. And that means I have to motivate people that are different to get the mission done. So let's get the mission done. We have to be adaptive. But one of the things that's interesting is that when you're talking to young people about your time in the military, I find it far more advantageous to tell them what you're doing now. Like, what did you do in the Army? Who cares? Let me tell you what I'm doing now. I own a house. I have a car. I have, many leather books and smell of mahogany. The Army is what gave me that. The Army prepared me for this part of life. And if you want to be like me, serve your country, because you're going to get everything you want and control of your destiny and control your plight. And then when you're talking to other veterans, you got to understand that, sometimes people want to hear from you. I find that most people just want to talk about their experience. And it's more like the guidance counselor in high school. You can have a really good guidance counselor that's giving you great ideas. And then you've got like that disgruntled 40-year-old who's just like, I'm looking for ideas. What do you want to do? I made a horrible choice by becoming a guidance counselor. Tell me what I should have done. You've got a lot of veterans that are testing you out to see if you're going through what they're going through. Does the 4th of July freak you out? Do you find that, someone drops a dish and you recoil? When you hear someone's story, does your heart race? Do you sweat? That's not someone trying to impress you.
Yeah.
That's not someone trying to get pity. That's someone trying to see, is this normal?
Yeah.
Am I a freak, or is this what you're doing too? And how important it is just to tell someone, you went through some horrible stuff, bro. Like, I get it. You're normal. You're great. In fact, you're better than normal, and you're better than great, because you have the courage to talk about it and let other people know they're going through the same thing too. That's power. That's power.
Right. It's well known that the Congressional Medal of Honor Society and Medal of Honor Foundation, they have their program where they go around and they talk about patriotism to school kids. And that's great. Do you find yourself being pulled into a lot of those things, or is your schedule pretty busy that you don't have a lot of time to make those appearances?
I love the society is great. The foundation, the museum they're building in Texas.
That's right.
My whole thing, the only reason why the society is important to me is because I get to hang out with these studs that I just admire so much. I mean, I fanboy out. Like Hershey Miyamura is in a room. I am shutting, civilians up, and everyone needs to take a knee. And, this is, I got to go to, Roger Donlin is the stud they based the Green Beret movie off of. And the song was based off of Roger Donlin. I got to go to his house, and I was on his couch, and he's just sitting there, and his wife is like, could you please leave? And I'm like, ma'am, I'm going to stay here until I am done. You just, I need to hear this man. This is our history, Benny Atkins, who
Oh,
passed away from COVID. That story, nobody believed that story, that his Medal of Honor citation ends with a Bengal tiger eating the Viet Cong.
yeah. Yeah,
You-
there
Gary
was no more flight on the bird, right? And it was
right.
because so he had to go out into the
Oh,
jungle.
I got these Marines and Gary Biker, Gary
Oh
Luttrell,
yeah,
Pat
right.
Day, who Pat Day will tell you I'm the greatest helicopter pilot in the world, and he means it. Like there's he knows this. These guys are absolute treasures, and they walk the earth, and it's the most amazing thing to be able to say you had Audie Murphy and James Doolittle. I got Pat Day, and for the longest time we had an EWO. Woody Williams was just a
Yeah.
perfect human being,
Oh,
and
such a great guy, great loss.
so I'm selfish where I do those events not because I mean the kids are great, talking to people, awesome. But what I'm doing is I'm just absorbing this amazing testosterone coming from these 80-year-old men that are just like, talking about, from Ia Drang,
Yeah.
Joe Marm just sitting there talking about getting his jaw blown off. And I'm like, oh, Patterson. I mean, they're awesome. The Marines, the soldiers, the airmen, they're awesome.
It's really great. We've had a new crop of Medal of Honor recipients since you were awarded the medal. And I got a chance to talk to Earl Plumley, great guy, and Thomas Paine, another one. Just like, wow, you did what? You rescued how many people?
Thomas Paine with a like a bolt cutter. Like of all the weapon systems you expected to read the citation.
Yeah, I know.
Paine's over there like MacGyver cutting locks loose. And,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like those guys are they're cool. But honestly, well, first of all, Paine should be the Iraq recipient. They differentiate that, and that's annoying.
Yeah.
I claim Paine. I think Paine's in the Iraq war side of the ledger.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't care when the war ended.
Yeah.
He's an Iraq guy. But they're awesome. And the cool part is, they're Green Berets, they're Rangers, they're all this other stuff. But, they're a lot of these newer recipients are all still in the military.
Yeah.
And you saw that with Matt Williams and Paine and Plumlee. They're like, hey, this isn't affecting my career. I'm going to continue to do. And who doesn't want a sergeant major walking around with an wage? Could you imagine that? Crazy. You're not falling out of that run.
No.
Matt Williams jogs up next to you. You're not gonna get out of that 5K. You're in.
No, absolutely. What is your new passion as of late?
Macrame. No, I'm really obsessed with just highlighting how many Walmart and Home Depot are incredible institutions, and they do a lot for veterans. And I love those Fortune 500 companies that do that. But I really think that there's a lot of talent in our ranks, and we get out there and work, but don't quit dreaming. Don't quit your idea that you could start a business, or you can own a Fortune 500 company, or go and be a dentist or a lawyer or anything else. I want to see veterans kind of expand more into the professional side and take themselves seriously and go into these job interviews. You've accomplished so much in uniform. Go out there and compete and show the world what we can do. So I like to hear the stories of like Black Rifle Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is just why not?
Yeah.
Why not compete with Starbucks? Who's going to replace Hertz and Enterprise? Give me a veteran-owned rental car company.
Yeah.
Maybe we could fix the supply chain crisis. Maybe we could rebuild hurricane-devastated cities. That really motivates me to hear these stories of guys that are like, oh yeah, I was in the Air Force at a time of war, but I, created a hydrogen cell to fuel vehicles. Like, awesome. Let's hear that. Let's constantly remind people that you want veterans in your community. You want them in your teaching your kids. You want them as your mentors.
I remember, so we were sitting outside waiting for an event outside of Yankee Stadium. And if you remember, we couldn't get in right away. It just took a while for us to get in, going back to the tour. But we sat down, I think it was a McDonald's, so it was right across the way. And we were outside, and you just started talking about, hey, you know what? There's some really veteran-friendly small business that you can get involved in. And I remember writing these things down because to be fair with you, I was nervous because I was a year away from getting out of retiring from the Army. And I was like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it on the outside. And just a conversation with you, and I was like, maybe it's not going to be so bad. Maybe I can do it. I think a lot of people that are afraid to pull the trigger on retiring or get out of the military, or they're out and they're like, oh my goodness, they're freaking out. I think that they need to hear that. Just everything that you just said right now about all these great stories. We probably do need to get more vocal about our successes. And what better way?
You went from that to joining an unheard of small VSO that a nice little startup there at the VFW.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, seriously though, to think that you would go from Armed Force Network to be a public affairs officer to all these experiences you had in your career. And then, I mean, look, if you were a senator or a congressman, how could you truly impact veterans on a daily basis? I mean, the VFW, that used to be the campfire that everyone sat around, and it still can be. And so everything's evolving and changing, and we're learning about, I think we focus far too much. I was talking about this. I hung out with one of my Ramrods today doing some events, and haven't seen this guy since Washington. Great. John Ruiz is a great guy.
Oh yeah.
And we were talking about how when you talk about the old crew, that you always lead with like, did you hear what happened to Pete? Did you, it's always like, he was weed eating and the leaf blower got his arm. And we always focus on like the drama of tragedy, but we never, and then you get to the bottom, and then you're like, well, how is Wilson doing? Oh, Wilson started a company and sold it to Microsoft. And it's like, well, that should have maybe let us off with that brought the sun out, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
There are so many incredible stories. And it doesn't mean that we don't want to help our people that are struggling and because we know there's greatness in them. We saw it.
Yeah.
I'm not taking a leap of faith when someone I served with, I'm giving them a pep talk. I'm reminding them that who they are.
Yeah.
Right? You never take your own life in a stack outside of a house because you were needed. That would have been unforgivable if when the enemy was shooting at us, you decided, I'm quitting. No one would that doesn't even go through a head of a soldier. But when you come home, you think what? You think you peaked in your 20s? You think there's nothing on the other side of this? Maybe we have to remind you who you are. We have to remind you of the greatness in you. When we have to remind you that you didn't stop changing the world with that uniform on, that you're still going to impact this world. You still have a destiny and you're still loved and admired. And I think the more people that realize we can do this, we can do this. The Vietnam guys taught us how to do it. They wrote the book. It's like a life hack of like, how do you handle this situation? The Vietnam generation never got divorced. Oh no. The Vietnam generation never had a problem connecting with their children. Really? They never had a problem with inflation. They never had a problem with affording in this economy of what do you do? They did it all. They're right there. Just ask them.
Yeah.
What do we do? How did you do it? How can I be better? Let's start using the resources. I don't need the VA is awesome. I don't need the VA for that. I need veterans for that. I need people willing to mentor each other and say, you're going to be good. It's going to be okay. It'll buff out.
So for those out there that might be listening or watching that are thinking about writing a book, what's your advice?
Stay out of my lane. No, learn the code is what I tell them. No, listen, let me give you a little secret. All right. The publishing industry doesn't like us. And there's something to it. There are so many amazing people in publishing. But if you're a writer, historian, member of the media, veterans are not your best friend, because veterans actually have done things. You're not just talking about something. You're not just articulating and sharing something. You've experienced it. So when you're writing a novel, fictional story, and you're like, I know what it's like to say goodbye to someone you love. You've lived it. You've experienced it. You're writing from your life. That's tough to beat. That's tough to beat. And there's a prose and a narrative that's so rich and so raw. And if you work hard on it, it's amazing what you can. But you gotta be conditioned that, there's gonna be a lot of doors that are shut in your face. And it's not, you're gonna get no more than you're gonna get yes. But I'm telling you, if you want to write, do it. If you want to do a movie, who's gonna stop you? You cleared roads with bombs in it. We know that you have intestinal fortitude. You got out there and you didn't put your chin strap on the proper way during a mortar attack. Like, I've seen you. You can do anything you want to do. Do you really want to do it? That's the question. If you really want to do it, I don't have to tell you how to do it. You're going to find a way to do it because you're a veteran and you're focused and you're going to knock it out. So there are a million resources to look out and how to do it. Look it up. And I need an agent. I need a manuscript. I need a discipline of, I'm going to write every single day, even if I have nothing to say. Write. Sometimes I look at a blank screen and I'm like, I can't fill this. So what I'll do is I'll just take something I wrote a year ago and just put it and scroll down just so I could see something on there. And I'm just adding to it. I'm just filling the blanks in, just fill it with something, get back into that area and realize that even if you're not going to publish this thing, even if you're not going to let other people see it, it's important to just see how you look at things and how you process this crazy experience of what you went through. Because that's part of journaling. That's part of growing. It's part of, getting it out there. But you can't act like, oh no, someone said, like, no one said no to you before as an E for, your dream of going to, we're wired for it. We're wired for rejection. We're built to withstand adversity. That's how we were conditioned. That's how we were raised. So guess what? You want to go start a business? Start a business. They can't stop you. They can't stop you. You like a person and you want to have a conversation with them. Ask them on a date. Why are you afraid? You're not afraid. We don't allow the brain to tell you, I can't do this, or it's not for me. No one's going to want you to join the club. Sometimes you just gotta show up and sit down and not leave. You want to sit at the table, just don't leave the table.
Yeah, man, that's great advice. But I know you're super busy. Before I let you go, what are your thoughts for this Veterans Day? I mean, this whole show has been about veterans, but I mean, shoot.
Oh, I just think that we are, there's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic, and there's a lot of reasons to, Afghanistan is raw and it hurts, and you see what's happening in Ukraine, and what will America be in the future. But the only thing I've ever needed in my life, and I think the older we get, we realize how this is so rare, but just having someone, there's always a moment in a really bad, Hallmark movie, that Jerry Maguire moment where they're like, I'm with you, take your fish tank, and someone's with you. Someone's always there. I felt like Thor when I had people willing to stand next to me in any environment, whether it was kinetic and violent, or it was just, having people willing to say, yeah, whatever you're doing, I'm doing it too. That's really what the whole game is about. It's just willing to say, we talk about the guys that stack on a building and found an enemy threat on the other side of the door. How many tens of millions of Americans stacked on a building and the room was empty? Does that mean they didn't have the courage to do what they had to do if there was someone there? No, that means that person was ready and willing. And that's what we're built. That's the foundation of our generation. And that day to me is a reminder that this is pretty special. This is a really incredible generation. And I look at I've had an opportunity to see a lot of young soldiers and Marines, and it kind of breaks my heart to say that they're better than we were.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks because, everyone wants to say that the next generation, it's a parlor game, old people say, because we hate being old.
Yeah.
They just want to remind you that I spent a long time in my Army career professional goaltending, the young kid coming up.
Right.
And one of the things we talk about in this book is that a real leader is only a real leader if they're eclipsed by their subordinate. You're not really judged by what you do and what you accomplish. You're judged by what your men and women accomplish under you. And if you're not being passed by their greatness, you're not really all that special.
Yeah.
Right. So it's why we're elite is that every generation is better than the previous. And that's because that's how you raise them. If you want to talk about how great these soldiers are today, you have a piece of that. You help them be better than you. And that's why we're the best in the world.
Right.
China can't say that. Russia can't even get gas, let alone say that. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why we have swagger, and this Army and this military is elite.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, for those out there that are interested in David's new book, it's called Remember the Ramrods, An Army Brotherhood in War and Peace. It's available now. Where can they find it, David?
Everywhere good and bad books are sold. You can get it Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you name it. Pick up a copy. I really hope what this book does is it just encapsulates that we didn't peak in our 20s, that there's good days ahead of you. And a lot of times, peer pressure, you smoke at 14, it's because your peers made you do it. You can do a lot of great things if you have great peers too. And a lot of what we do in the military is because peers are doing it. The odd man out is the one that says, I want to quit. Everyone else is saying we're going forward. So I had great peers, I had great leaders, I had a great institution, and I still love my Army. But just remember who you are, and you will always be that person. And that person was designed to withstand every sling and arrow the world and the enemy could throw at you. You're tough. You're ready to go. No more excuses. Just go be great. That's how we're going to honor, our country, is by being the best we can be.
And they can also find you on Odyssey. I'm just going to put that out there too. The David Bellavia Show, a great talk show that you lead up there in the Buffalo, New York area, where your home is. Where your home. Bills. Yeah, well, yeah. Would you say go Bills? Yeah,
yeah
right. And so always great to talk to you. Medal of Honor recipient David Bellavia. You are truly always welcome here to the podcast and to the VFW anytime.
I really appreciate you. I have a great deal of respect for you. Thank you for what you've done for the country and what you continue to do. And all the vets out there, God bless you. Thank you for your service. And thanks for setting the bar for our generation to look up to you, especially you Vietnam guys. We wouldn't be able to accomplish what we were able to accomplish had you not been our fathers and leading the way and showing us what right is. So thank you.
All right. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Still Serving, the VFW podcast. To learn more about the veterans of foreign wars, please visit our website at vfw.org and follow us on Facebook at VFW Fans and on Twitter at VFWHQ.